Et on n'est rien du tout.
The story begins against the endless desert, where silence is broken by the heavy mechanical thrum of rotor blades. A helicopter cuts across the sky, and inside the cabin sits Jen, a young attractive blonde woman dressed in a bright outfit that stands out vividly against the muted tones of sand and rock outside. Her blonde hair sways as the wind rushes through the open door. Sitting next to her is Richard, a wealthy man in his 40s, with a controlled demeanor. He seems like the type of man used to getting what he wants. The helicopter lands in front of an extravagant villa, planted like an oasis in the middle of emptiness. Jen steps out, taking in the scene with wide-eyed delight. She catwalks towards the building, like she owns the place. The helicopter pilot hands Richard a treat, which he asks him to consider a welcome present before he takes off. The villa's seamless design flows from a striking exterior of glass walls and sliding doors to an interior decorated in a slick, modern style that exudes wealth.
Petit cadeau de bienvenue de la maison.
Parfait. Merci, Roberto.
Richard and Jen quickly slip into the rhythm of their secret rendezvous. They take off their clothes and carry out their fantasies with each other. After their activity, Richard receives a call from his actual wife, whom he interacts with casually, like he didn't just defile their marital vows for kinky pleasures. He returns to join Jen in bed, and they go on with their desires. The next morning, Jen struts around the villa in nothing but her underwear and her earphones jammed in. She blasts music so loud, you'd think she's trying to drown out the sound of her own thoughts. It's a full Beyoncé at Coachella vibe, except instead of a stadium of screaming fans, it's just her, a pair of socks on the floor, and probably a Spotify playlist titled Hot Girl Walk Indoors Edition. She suddenly turns around and locks eyes with two strangers outside the glass door, rifles in hand, staring at her like they've just stumbled onto an OnlyFans live stream. She immediately calls Richard, who pulls up to explain that they're his hunting partners, and they had arrived earlier than expected. He immediately introduces them to each other, so they can at least get familiar before Jen leaves in 2 days. Stan and Dimitri, the men...
Bah nous aussi, ça nous fait plaisir de te voir. Je crois qu'on a bien fait de se faire chier, on dirait.
Juste le jour où l'hélico est en révision.
Are starstruck at Jen's elegance. She leaves the boys to catch up, but their eyes get glued to her backside while she walks away. From the moment they see her, Jen's presence electrifies the space. Stan stares openly, captivated, while Dimitri hides a smirk. Richard watches with a mix of amusement and unease. He knows Jen is beautiful.
She came for 2 days before.
Majestic looking, but he also senses the way his friends are reacting to her, and it scratches at his possessiveness. Despite making it clear that Jen is just a friend, Richard tells them, especially Stan, not to even dream of trying anything. As night falls, the villa turns into a party ground. Stan holds a conversation with Jen, while Dimitri stares at her lips with binoculars like a creep. He then happens to notice the treat the pilot had handed to Richard, and gets curious about it. Not trusting his friends, Richard snatches it and hands it over to Jen to keep it somewhere safer. He tells them about how a Polish guy got so high on the package a few years ago that he sawed his own leg off without feeling an ounce of pain, and died as a result. Jen heads in and hides the substance inside her necklace. She then comes back and elevates the party for them, performing a show dance. She offers to dance with Richard, but Richard, sulking in the corner like Squidward watching SpongeBob have fun, declines her offer to dance. Next, she extends the offer to Stan, who gratefully hops on it. She dances with him until it makes Richard so uncomfortable, he has to step in and end the party. The following morning, a hazy veil of discomfort hangs over the villa. Richard has already slipped away, a brief absence to attend to arrangements for their planned excursion. Left behind, Jen wakes up slowly, her head pounding with a dull ache from the previous night. She is left to navigate the day with two men she knows almost nothing about. Dimitri, who is a silent, groaning mess, and Stan, who is terrifyingly energetic. Dimitri is the very picture of a man in the throes of a terrible hangover. Stan, however, is the complete opposite. He is unnervingly vibrant, his excitement over Jen's presence making the air thick with tension. He greets her with an unsettling grin when she emerges from her room, his eyes scanning her with an intensity that makes her skin crawl. His enthusiasm seems so genuine that he is oblivious to how deeply it unnerves her. The silence that follows is heavy and suffocating, filled only with the sound of her pulse in her ears. She feels his gaze on her, an oppressive weight that forces her to retreat into the supposed safety of the bedroom.
It's just the two of us. Oh, Richards went to give our passport to the gamekeeper.
But Stan follows, an unwelcome shadow. He enters the room just as she is in the vulnerable process of changing, and in her shock, she freezes. Trying to save face and avoid a public scene, she forces a strained smile and tries to brush off the intrusion as a harmless mistake. Stan, however, doesn't get the hint. Instead, he extends a hand, offering a business card with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. His invitation to catch up later feels less like a suggestion and more like an ominous promise. Jen is utterly bewildered by his needy persistence, her mind racing back to their brief, seemingly innocent exchange from the night before. Had she given him the wrong idea? She attempts to lighten the mood with a joke, suggesting he is just not tall enough to be her type. The laugh she hopes for never comes. Instead, Stan's demeanor darkens. He closes the distance between them, and the playful glint in his eyes fades into something cold and predatory. He presses her against the wall, the air in the room turning heavy and toxic. What began as an awkward flirtation quickly descends into a chilling encounter. Stan grows more insistent, his voice a low, threatening growl, his body language shifting into an aggressive, dominant posture. At that precise, horrifying moment, Dimitri walks in. For a split second, Jen's heart soars with the hope of rescue, but that hope is extinguished just as quickly. Dimitri's eyes meet hers, and he simply turns on his heel and walks away, pretending he saw nothing. To make his indifference even more horrifying, he deliberately turns up the volume of the television, the blaring noise a cold, calculated act meant to drown out the sounds of a woman being assaulted by his friend.
And yet you seemed to like me yesterday. You came onto me like a pussy in it.
Later, when Richard returns to the villa, the sight of Jen in her condition sends a surge of rage through him. He lashes out at his friends, not out of concern for Jen, but out of a furious recognition of their recklessness. Their actions have endangered his well-laid plans, creating a liability he never anticipated. Jen, seeing a glimmer of the man she thought he was, asks him to call for the helicopter so she can leave. But Richard, in a final act of heartbreaking betrayal, offers her money. The cold gesture is more or less a transaction to buy her silence, as though her trauma and dignity can be purchased and discarded. He has no intention of allowing her to go back and ruin his reputation. When Jen threatens to report him to his wife,
But you're so damn beautiful too, it's hard to resist you.
Jen, this is the possibility to change your life.
Richard's anger finally boils over. He strikes her, a shocking, brutal blow that steals her breath and shatters her last shred of trust. The man she had believed was her protector, the man who had appeared to care for her, reveals himself to be nothing more than a cold, self-serving monster, driven by fear and a new understanding of the true nature of the men around her.
You call that goddamn helicopter, I'll call your wife and tell her everything.
Jen bolts from the house and sprints into the unforgiving desert, with Richard in hot pursuit. Stan and Dimitri, drawn by the thrill of the chase, sprint after them to join the twisted game. The trio drives her deeper and deeper into the arid, desolate landscape until she finds herself cornered at the edge of a high cliff. With no escape, Jen finally stops running, her body shaking from exhaustion. Richard approaches her, his face a mask of feigned regret. He apologizes for hitting her and promises to meet her demands, grabbing Stan's phone to call for the helicopter, claiming it will be there in 30 minutes. As Jen, in a moment of desperate vulnerability, lets down her guard, she is met with the most profound betrayal of all. Without a moment's hesitation, Richard shoves her backward.
Calling the chopper, I don't want to hear another word about it. Didn't mean to hurt you, just stress. He'll be there in 30 minutes.
Her body stumbles over the edge of the cliff, a sickening descent that ends abruptly. She crashes into a sharp, jagged tree limb, which impales her abdomen, leaving her dangling in excruciating agony. A gasp of pain escapes her lips, a sound swallowed by the vast, empty air. Stan, his face a mix of shock and confusion, asks Richard why he did it. The answer is chillingly pragmatic. Richard explains that Jen could have had them all sent to jail for 15 years, a fate he is simply not prepared to face. He then reassures his friends that everything will be fine, and that all they need to do is carry on with their hunting trip and return in the evening to dispose of her body. They then meticulously remove all of her belongings, erasing any sign of her ever being there, before they continue with their sick game.
Compris. On fait rien d'inhabituel qui puisse sembler suspect. Alors maintenant, vous allez faire ce que je vous dis.
Jen snaps back into consciousness in excruciating pain. She dangles on the tree branch for what feels like an eternity. Blood trickles steadily down the length of the branch, dripping onto the sun-baked earth below. And there she is, trying to keep her painful breathing steady. The men have left, convinced she will not survive, but Jen clings stubbornly to life. As time passes, she realizes she cannot just lie there, and that she has to make a move. She reaches for her lighter, which had fallen onto the ground with her. And through the pain of stretching, with one's body being impaled by something protruding from the center of the earth, she manages to reach it. She uses the lighter to set the branch on fire, making it weak enough to release her to the floor. On the floor where she lay with a piece of a branch still left in her stomach, she hears the sound of vehicles approaching and realizes she has to act fast if she still values her life. In pain and agony, she drags herself to a corner that very much hides her from the field of view of the men. The men realize they could actually be cooked if they don't act fast, so they drive to the bottom of the cliff to search for any traces of Jen they can find. All they see is a heavy blood trail, which they trace to the edge of a river. At the river, Richard and Dimitri decide to split up, while Stan waits in case she comes back. As the world-weary Jen stumbles upon Dimitri, she sees an opportunity to finally turn the tables. He is, to her absolute delight, a master of self-sabotage, leaving his gun unattended while answering nature's call. With the stealth of a cat burglar, or maybe a very determined squirrel, she seizes the firearm, ready to become the hero of her own story. But life, as it often does, has a punchline. The gun is as empty as a politician's promise. Jen has just walked into the most cliché trap in the history of traps. Dimitri, clearly believing he is in a spy movie, lunges at her and tries to give her an unscheduled underwater bubble bath. But Jen, with the kind of quick thinking that only comes from a healthy dose of adrenaline and a whole lot of bad luck, manages to grab his knife. She then proceeds to redecorate his face with it, proving that some people are just better at interior design than others. After her messy, one-woman project, she snags his supplies and his car, which promptly sputters to a halt, demonstrating a loyalty on par with a fair-weather friend. Forced to continue on foot, she eventually finds refuge in a cave, the kind of place where you hope to find a friendly hobbit, but you're more likely to find a slightly damp rock. Inside the bag of supplies, she finds a can of beer. She gulps it down to quench her thirst. Meanwhile, the pesky branch from an earlier misadventure is wreaking havoc in her stomach, making her regret every life choice that led her to this moment. Just when things couldn't get more absurd, she remembers the secret substance she hid in her necklace. A quick pop, and she's off, riding a wave of pain-free, euphoric energy. With a superhero-like strength, she casually pulls the branch out. She then performs a piece of impromptu surgery, cutting open the empty beer can and sterilizing it with fire, until it is a glowing, red-hot piece of metal, which she plasters onto her stomach. And then, as a final act of dramatic flair, she collapses, proving that even a hero needs a nap after a particularly eventful day. The following day by the riverside, Richard and Stan discover Dimitri's body and are beyond traumatized. They set out into the desert in search of Jen. After a long while, Jen wakes up and removes the metal from her stomach to reveal an imprint of the can in the form of a tattoo. She's haunted by terrible hallucinations, mixing memories of Richard's betrayal with grotesque images of ants swarming over her flesh. The desert itself seems alive, the wind whispering, the heat pulsating like a heartbeat. She finally regains her consciousness and realizes that the only way for her to make it out alive is to become the hunter. With the supplies at hand, Jen prepares. She straps ammunition to her body, steadies her grip on the rifle, and steps outside into the blistering sun. With the use of binoculars, she sights her next prey and begins to make an advance towards him. Jen tracks Stan down to a rocky hill, where he tries to refuel his car. She aims her rifle at him and shoots his arm, causing him to bleed massively. Stan runs away and uses his own blood trail as a trap for her. Jen follows the trail and falls into the trap, leading to Stan blowing her right ear off. She immediately gets up and sets a trap for him with broken bottles, and he falls straight into it. After managing to get rid of the glass residue on his feet, he gets into his car and tries to run Jen over with it. He eventually ends up with a bullet through his skull. Getting no form of response or signal from Stan, Richard realizes what must have happened. In frustration, he heads back to the villa. Back at the villa, Richard grows uneasy. He senses the inevitable. Jen has survived longer than he ever imagined, and his careful plans are unraveling. He acts swiftly, contacting his pilot and arranging for the helicopter to come earlier than planned. If he can escape the desert before Jen arrives, he can salvage what's left of his life, perhaps spin the story his way. Richard strips off his clothes and heads to the shower for a bath. While he tries to wash away the dread that clings tighter than sweat or blood, he hears a noise. He immediately gets out of the shower and grabs a gun, without even bothering about grabbing some draws. He parades the house in full commando mode, revealing the beauty of life to his little Johnny. After parading every inch of the house and finding nothing, he decides to sit down and rest. And that's when he notices the female hunter, standing outside the glass walls, with her gun's aim locked on him. Her body is smeared with dirt and blood, but her eyes are steady. She has been reborn in fire and pain, and this house of betrayal is now her hunting ground. Richard, now fully aware of her presence, tries to scramble for a weapon, but gets a shot right in his stomach. Richard drags himself across the house with his blood, leaving an obvious trail for Jen to follow. He tries to use the blood trail as a trap to ambush Jen, but she's 2 steps ahead. She sees through his plan and tries to ambush him too. The house, all of a sudden, becomes a maze of violence. Richard stumbles through hallways, leaving trails of red smeared on white walls and polished floors. Despite his wound, he refuses to fall easily. Desperation sharpens his instincts. At one point, he ambushes Jen, crashing into her with raw force. They slam into the walls, the shotgun clattering across the floor. Richard, using every ounce of strength, grapples with her neck and slams her to the ground. His blood pours freely, but adrenaline keeps him fighting. Jen gasps for breath under his grip, but her resolve hardens. In a brutal counter, she drives her hand deep into the gaping wound in his stomach. Richard howls in agony, his body convulsing from the unbearable pain. This moment of weakness is all she needs. Jen crawls toward the shotgun with her bloodied hands and seizes the weapon. She then turns, and without hesitation, fires into his chest, finishing him off for good this time, and putting an end to her terror. The helicopter arrives shortly after. The end. Thank you for sticking to the end of my video. Please do me the biggest favor by leaving a like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video.